So yesterday we started with the definitions. We continued discussing the definition. We started with the definition of debenture. Thereafter, we discussed the definition of deposit, which I said that deposit definition will again get back once we study the deposit chapter. Then the depository, derivatives, director, dividend. We understood dividend in detail, right? Document, ESOP. ESOP also we discussed it in very much detail. The definition of expert, financial institutions, financial statement, financial year, which I said you is one of the most important definition for your. I'm sorry, I think I got logged out. Am I audible? Am I audible? Okay, so sorry. So we discussed the last definition that we discussed yesterday was the definition of a foreign company. So foreign company means a company which is incorporated outside India, correct? The company which is incorporated outside India and has a place of business in India. Now, this can be either electronically or it can be physically, right? This is what we discussed. Now let's go ahead and discuss the definition of free reserves. So the definition of free reserves means any reserves, right? Any reserve which as per the latest audited balance sheet of the company is available for the distribution of dividend. So any reserve which is available for the distribution of dividend is what it is, a free reserve. Then there is a proviso. So what is the objective of proviso in the law? Why do we have this proviso? Why do we have this proviso? What is the objective of this proviso? What is the objective of this proviso? What does this proviso explain? So you have a provision. Okay, you have a provision. No, not terms and conditions. Just see, you have a provision here. Okay, then proviso will give a exception to this. Proviso will always provide an exception to this, or it is going to deviate from what is given here, subject to certain terms and conditions. Like we discussed the definition of the financial year yesterday. So the main proviso, the main provision, what does it say? It says the financial year will end on 31st March of every year. And if it's a company which has just got incorporated, then the next financial year, the next year's March. Okay, fine. Then we have a proviso where it says that the company can deviate. The company can deviate from 31st March. It can have some other day. It can have some other period, provided the conditions are fulfilled, where we say that it is for these purpose, and the approval is received from the central government. Earlier it was NCLT. So do you get what kind of provision is this? Like whenever we have a proviso, the proviso gives some exceptions. So it says that free reserve, the main content, the main clause says that free reserves means such reserves which as per the latest audited balance sheet of the company are available for distribution as dividend, provided that any amount representing the unrealized gain, notional gain, or revaluation of assets, whether shown as reserves or otherwise, or any change in the carrying amount of the assets or the liability recognized in the equity, including surplus in the profit and loss account on the measurement of the assets or liability at the fair value, shall not be treated at free reserves. So technically, if you see, both of them are same. Both of them says that if there is any notional gain, what is notional gain? What is notional gain? What is notional gain? So you all had studied the CA foundation law from me. Now you have come for CA intermediate law also, right? So CA foundation I have recovered, right? The gain I have recovered. The CA intermediate gain also I have recovered. But if I record in my profit and loss account that you all will be coming to me for CA final law lectures also, and I am going to charge you X amount, so many number of students are there, multiply that, I get a total amount. So this is what, this is all notional gain, because in actual you have not realized it. So either you realize or you get the right to realize. When either of the two is established, we say it's not a notional gain. But otherwise, if any of the two is missing, either you have not received it or you have not established the right to receive it, in that case, it is considered as a notional gain. Then next you have is the revaluation of assets. So there is one term you all have studied in your law, revaluation reserve. Have you studied this? Revaluation reserve in accounts. You must have come across this term, revaluation reserve. So what happens in case of revaluation reserve? Let's say there is a land and building which was acquired by the company for 10 lakh rupees, right? Back in, let's say 2000, in the year 2000. Today is 2021, and this land and building of 10 lakh rupees is right now valued at, let's presume, 3 crore rupees. So you will say there is a gain of 2 crore 90 lakh rupees. Now this is what, this is a revaluation gain. You have actually not realized it, right? So this revaluation gain, this is only due to the revaluation, okay? And this is not realized. What if the company has sold this? Then we will say that this is a realized gain. Otherwise, this is not a realized gain, and hence this should not be considered as a free reserve. Now, whether you have taken this 2 lakh 90 crores to the credit of the P&L account or not, whether you have created a revaluation reserve or not, it doesn't matter. What it is to be seen that whether the profit is out of revaluation or the profit is not realized, then in that case, it will not be considered as your free reserve. Also, one more thing you need to see here is that uh, there is one term which has been used here, carrying amount of the asset. So what is carrying amount of the asset? So the carrying amount of asset means it is the uh, book value. The book value, carrying amount is the book value. So these are all accounting terms which are used by the accounting standards. These are the standard terms which are used there in the accounting standards. Like you are going to study section accounting standard 28, which discusses about the impairment. So impairment is what? It is a gradual, it is not a gradual, it is a sudden and a major reduction in the value of the asset, which is called as impairment. So technically there also you are doing revaluation, but you use these kind of terms. So any reserve which is out of the notional gain or revaluation reserve or which is unrealized, that will not be considered as your free reserve. Okay, is this clear? This will not be considered as your free reserve. Otherwise, any reserve which is available for the distribution of dividend, that is considered as your free reserve. Okay. Then the next definition that we have is the definition of global depository receipts, that is also called as GDR. Now, global depository receipt, before you understand this, just understand this term, depository receipt. Let's first understand what is a depository receipt, and then we will be able to understand what is GDR. By the way, there is another concept that is called as ADR, which is again similar to GDR only. The only difference is the country where you issue these. So if the depository receipts are issued in United States of America, we say it is ADR. And if we say these are issued elsewhere, so we call it as global depository receipts, that is GDR. Now, what is depository receipts? Just understand this situation. So there is a investor in USA. Okay, there is an investor in USA who wants to invest in your company, and there is this Indian company which wants to issue shares to this US investor. So what this Indian company is going to do, the promoter of this Indian company or any existing shareholder of the company or the company itself will take a bag, right? Now just imagine, not literally, does not happen that the company will come up with the bag. Company will take this bag, okay? Just for the understanding sake, just understand. There is a company will take a bag. In this bag, what you have? You have the shares of the company, okay? This bag will be given to a custodian. Now is a custodian one who takes the custody of the assets for safekeeping. So this is the custodian, and this custodian is in India. So we will call this as the domestic custodian, and they are professionals. We call it as domestic custodian bank. Do you understand this? Do you understand this transaction? there is a custodian bank. To this custodian bank, this Indian company has deposited a bag full of shares. How many shares are here? Let's say there are 1 lakh shares. Okay, there are 1 lakh shares in this bag. This share is being deposited to the domestic custodian bank. Now, this domestic custodian bank will now inform or will intimate the overseas custodian bank. Okay, overseas custodian bank. And what will be the intimation for? The intimation will be for the receipt of shares. Intimate the receipt of shares. So this overseas custodian bank will get this intimation from this domestic custodian bank that the receipt, the shares, 1 lakh shares have been received. So based on this intimation, the overseas custodian bank is going to issue depository receipts. Do you understand now depository receipts? So depository receipt is what? It is a security. Okay. This security will say that the receipts, this will give a confirmation of the receipt. What is the receipt? Let's say we get this calculation also here. We say that 1 GDR is equal to 10 shares. Okay. So this is, let's say, 1 GDR. So this GDR would say that if you are holding this GDR, it is as good as you are holding 10 shares of the company. Do you understand this? The depository receipt. These depository receipts will be issued to the investors in USA, and this will be called as ADR. If we issue this to others, to the other countries, let's say European Union, Australia, Singapore, right? I've written countries, but just understand. Then in that case, this will be called as GDR. Now, do you understand why it is called as depository receipt? Because these receipts, these depository receipts will be issued to the investor, and these receipts is a certificate which shows that certain number of shares as pre-decided, it can be 1 GDR is equal to 10 shares, 5 shares, 100 shares, as the case may be, depending upon the foreign exchange and the quantum which you want to set, right? This will be given there. And based on this, the depository receipts will be issued. So global depository receipt. And who are these custodian banks? So you can say that the depositories, remember we discussed NSDL, CDSL, they are the depositories here. They can be the custodian bank, and there are other intermediaries who are also allowed. So that's not the matter of discussion as of now, but just understand that there is a domestic custodian bank. So domestic global depository receipt means any instrument. Okay, I said you this is an instrument in the form of depository receipts. So what is this depository receipt? It is a receipt which shows that certain number of shares are received by the custodian bank here by whatever name called. So you issue this security saying that these are depository certificates. Doesn't matter, still it will be called as depository receipts created by the foreign depository. So as I said, overseas custodian bank. So this I said is going to be the Indian depository, the domestic depository bank, domestic custodian bank. This is going to be the overseas depository, overseas custodian bank, overseas depository created by the foreign depositories outside India and authorized by the company making an issue of such depository receipts. So as I said, the company delivers the shares to these domestic custodian bank who intimate the receipt of these shares to the foreign custodian bank or the foreign depository. And based on this intimation, the overseas depositories or the overseas custodian bank, they issue depository receipts to the investors in USA or into the other countries. Now, depending upon where these depository receipts are issued, they will be called as GDR or they will be called as ADR. So in when we discuss about global depository receipt, this has been defined in the Income Tax Act, in the Companies Act, but ADR is not defined here. But certainly you will come across this term called as ADR also. The concept is absolutely same. Guys, is this clear? Is this clear? Sorry, I think I was losing the internet connection. And just fix the modem now. Okay. So let's get back. Now we have covered the definition of global depository receipt. Now we'll have the definition of a government company. Okay. So we have the definition of government company here. Am I audible now? Am I audible? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. All right. So just see, we have the definition of a government company here. So government company means in which government has the stake. Government is holding that company. Government has stake. So in case of a government company, remember this percentage, 51%. Remember when we discussed about the concept of control, we discussed more than 50%. But when it comes to government company, you need how much? You need 51% or more. So if there is a company, okay, if there is a company, in that company, 51% or more, okay, 51% or more of the shares is held by central government, is held by state government, or is held by collectively central government, state government, or it is held by some other government company, then in this case, we will say the company is a government company. The company is a government company. Just see this. Government company means any company in which not less than 51% of the paid up share capital is held by central government, state government, okay, or governments, or partly by the central government and partly by one or more state government. And it also includes a company which is subsidiary company of a government company. So in case, so I'll also amend this part a little. A company which is subsidiary of a government company is also a government company. Does this make sense? Does this entire part make sense? Right? Now, when we say the paid up capital, the paid up capital will be construed with the total voting power. So ultimately, 51% or more of the voting power we'll have to see. If there are differential voting rights, we'll have to see the voting power. If differential voting rights are not there, the shareholding and voting rights are going to be same. Okay. Also, one more thing. What if there is a company in which more than 50% is held by? So if let's say, what if 50.5% is held? Is it a government company? 50.5%. Is it a government company? No. So this is not a government company. Then what will be the status of this company? This will be called as public sector undertaking. PSU. No, no, not subsidiary. This will be called as public sector undertaking. PSU. There is a difference between the two. 50.5 definitely Vinith, one company will become subsidiary, but I say, let's say central government. So, okay, let's just say through a blank slide, I can explain you better. So there is company, let's say ABC Limited, and there is company PQR Limited. Okay. And there is central government. Central government is holding 51% in ABC. Central government is holding 50.5%. Now, both the companies are holding, both the companies are government companies. Answer is no. This can be one of the MCQ question. Okay. So this company is a government company. Okay. But this is not a government company. This company is not a government company. What this company is a PSU, public sector undertaking, because it is majoritarily owned by the government. Is this a government company? Yes. Is this a PSU? Yes. It is both PSU as well as a government company. But this is only a PSU, not a government company, because 51% or more is needed. So to qualify a company as a government company, what is needed? 51% or more. Okay. But to qualify as a PSU, what you need? You need more than 50%. I hope this makes it clear. Okay. Take a screenshot of this because this will not be part of your PowerPoint presentation. So every black slide which you see is not going to be part of your PowerPoint presentation. So you can take a screenshot of this for your future reference. Okay. So let's go ahead and discuss the next important definition. And the next important definition that we have is the definition of a holding company. This we have already covered. So holding company mean in relation to one or more other companies means a company. Now this was a tricky thing. Means a company of which such companies are subsidiary company. So again, the concept of holding company is a relative term. It is in relation to the other company. Like you cannot have a father if you don't have a son or you don't have a daughter, right? If you have a kid, then only you will be called as a father. So same way, if you do not have a subsidiary company, you cannot be a holding company. To have a holding company, you need a subsidiary company. Okay, same thing is here. But what problem arise because of this thing? It said holding company means a company. Now what do you mean by a company? What do you mean by a company? Company means a company which is incorporated in the current Companies Act or any of the previous company law. So what issue was there? That let's say there is a company ABC Limited. Okay. This ABC Limited had a subsidiary company in India. So to become subsidiary company, you need to have control or majority of the voting rights. We'll see to the definition of holding company. But let's say ABC Limited has control over, let's say, EFG Limited. Okay. So ABC Limited is the holding company. And why ABC Limited is the holding company? Because EFG is a subsidiary company. But then we have a company like this. Let's say Apple Inc., which is a company incorporated in USA. This company is controlling a company in India called as Mango Limited. Right. So there is a company called as Mango Private Limited. This Mango Private Limited is in India. Now, as per the concept, if you see, Apple is what? Apple is a holding company and Mango is the subsidiary company. Correct? Why? Because the control is there. However, because the definition of holding company says holding company means a company. Okay. If it says holding company means a company, now tell me, is Apple Inc. a company? Is Apple Inc. a company? Answer is no, because Apple is not incorporated in India. Apple is incorporated in US. So Apple is not a company. Say if a company is not a company, basically, if this Apple Inc. is not a company, can it be a holding company? Answer is no. So even though practically it was controlling one company in India, still Apple Inc. was not qualified to be called as a holding company. Therefore, this loophole was packed and we had an explanation which was added in 2017 where it said that for the explanation of this clause means only for the definition of holding company. For the definition of this clause, the expression company includes any body corporate. Now, is Apple Inc. a body corporate? Answer is yes. And here when the word company is used, it also includes what? It also includes a body corporate. Therefore, now Apple Inc. is also considered as the holding company. Do you understand what was the problem before and now how that problem has been resolved? Do you understand this? Is this clear? Right? So the holding company. So can I say in the entire Companies Act, company also includes body corporate? Can I say in the entire Companies Act, company also includes body corporate? Answer is no, because this explanation is only for this clause 46. It is only for clause 46. Therefore, we'll say company will include the term body corporate only for clause 46, right? All right. Then we have the definition of independent director. So independent director means a director as referred to in section 149 subsection 6. So this is something which you are going to study in your CA final. But as of now, if you want to get a basic idea about it, so what is an independent director? What are conditions? So basically section 149 subsection 6, it provides certain conditions. Okay. So there is one condition and then there are other five conditions. So if you qualify, so just ignore the number of conditions and all. It just says that there are conditions. Okay. If you fall in any one of the condition, then in that case, you are not independent director. If you do not satisfy any of the conditions there, then in that case, you are independent directors, right? For example, are you related to the promoters of the company? Answer is yes. Then you cannot be an independent director. So you don't have to be related. So there are certain conditions which are mentioned. So if you meet those conditions, then you become the independent director. Basically, the conditions which are mentioned are in a negative way. You need to not qualify the definition, I mean the conditions, so that you don't become the, I mean you can become the independent director. Otherwise the definition of independent director, it's a little tricky one. Okay, it's a little tricky one. When you will come in CA final, you will understand, right? The company should not, basically the independent director should not have a relationship with the company. Okay, the person is of integrity, he was the promoter. So you have clause A, clause B, clause C, clause D, clause E, right? Clause F. So there are six clauses which are there. Okay. Out of six, two clauses are something which you need to qualify, and four clauses you don't need to qualify. So that's all a list. Some other day we'll have a discussion on what is an independent director and how you actually become an independent director. But as of now, just understand the person who is not related to the company, or the person is not dependent on the company. If you are dependent on the company, if you are related to the company or to the promoters of the company, if you are director of the company, right, full-time director of the company, then you are not an independent director. Then you have the concept of Indian depository receipt. Now, will you understand the Indian depository receipt concept without me explaining about it? क्या आप अपने आप से इसको आप समझ सकते हो? बिल्कुल opposite हो जाएगा. Last time हमने बोला था we have a Indian company here which wants to issue securities to the investors abroad. Now there is some other foreign company. Okay, there is some other foreign company, or there is a body corporate outside India which wants to issue securities in India. The same process is going to happen. So they will have a custodian bank. This custodian bank is going to intimate the domestic custodian bank in India. This domestic custodian bank is then going to issue the IDRs to the public in India. Got it? So the same concept. So it's an instrument in the form of depository receipt created by domestic depository in India, authorized by the company which is incorporated outside India, making an issue of such depository receipts. So this is the IDR. Then we have the definition of interested director. So this was the definition of the interested director, okay, which is omitted. The definition of interested director was here. This is omitted. It is no longer there. And this is with effect from 9th Feb 2018. There is no longer the definition of interested director. So we had this concept of interested director, but now it is out, right? Then you have the definition of the issued capital. So we have already discussed this issued capital, right? Then we have the definition of KMP. So Vinith, the question you had asked day before yesterday, you have this question here. What is the definition of key managerial personnel, right? So also known as KMP. So there is a list to whom we say that they are the KMP of the company. So in that we have the chief executive officer of the company. Then we have the company secretary of the company, the full-time director of the company. Then we have the chief financial officer of the company. Okay. Now there was this and word which is omitted. So if you're wondering what is omitted from here, there was a word and, this and is now omitted. Okay. Then we have such other. So again, not very relevant for you because we added one more clause here. So and is omitted and has been put here. So from here it is omitted and this and has been included here. So what does it say? Such other officer not more than one level below the directors who is in full-time employment designated at KMP by the board and such other officer as may be prescribed. So when I say as may be prescribed, in that case, you'll have to see the rules. So ignore the rules right now. What does it say? CEO is a KMP, CFO is a KMP, company secretary is the KMP, full-time director is the KMP. Now you have the board of directors. Okay, this is the amendment. You have the board of directors one level below the board of directors, which means here there is an employee. This person has to be in full-time employment with the company, right? So we say this is the person who is in full-time employment with the company, plus this person is also designated as KMP by the board. Then this person is also what? This person is also a KMP. Now this person is one level below the board. One level below the board of directors. Does this make sense? Guys, does this make sense? This was amended in 2017. So in 2017, the list was expanded and this was added there. Okay. Before that, it was and as may be prescribed. So this is the new addition. So now you get it. So what I'll do, I'll remove this omitted part. Okay. As I said, I've included as it is what was there. So I'll remove this omitted part because this is not relevant at all. Unnecessarily, I'll not burden you with the information. And this is being amended in 2017 amendment. So with effect from again 9th Feb 2018, right? Now you'll be wondering, sir, amendment of 2017, why with effect from 2018? Two reasons. The amendment was passed by the parliament in the year 2017. So this was passed in December 2017, but the implementation was made subsequently in 2018. So some of the amendments you'll find it in the month of Feb, some of them you'll find it in the month of May, right? So the implementation was there. Vineet has asked a question, designated at KMP means the above point? No, designated means the person has been, uh, how do you say? You designate a person as the class monitor, which means you have made the person as the class monitor. You say this person is going to be the class monitor. So in your batch, suppose this is a class which is not appoint. You can say appoint, you can say nominate, elected. Yeah. So all these are synonyms to understand the word designated, but assigned, named. You can say all these words for your understanding. However, if you have to write the answer or if you have to again use it somewhere, you're going to use the word designate because that's a proper word. But to understand the word designate, you can say appoint, elect, nominate, right? Named as the KMP. These words will be fine. Okay. Then we have the definition of listed company. So the definition of listed company is now, okay, one more thing I need to add here, that every company which has got a paid up capital of 10 crore or more, they need to have a whole time KMP. Okay, so I'll write it here. Company with paid up capital of 10 crores or more need to appoint a KMP. They need to appoint KMP. Okay, let's go ahead and see the definition of listed company. So what is a listed company? A company which has any of its securities. Now, is security defined somewhere? Answer is yes. Securities is defined in the Companies Act also, but Companies Act will say go and check the definition what is defined in SCRA, Securities Contract Regulation Act 1956. So this act defines what is a security. So if any of your security, for example, if I say equity shares, that is a security. Preference shares, that's the security. Debenture, that's a security. Bond, that's a security. So anything which has been listed on the recognized stock exchange, you will become the listed company. That will make you as a listed company. Now, why the definition of listed company is so important? Because once you become a listed company, then in that case, there is SEBI regulations which gets applicable to you. You don't follow the rules. It's not that you don't follow the rules, but the rules are not applicable to you. The Companies Act itself says that if you are a listed company, comply with the SEBI regulations and not the rules. The rules are more for the unlisted companies, right? Sometimes you'll have to comply both SEBI regulations as well as the rules. I said you that rules and regulations will not conflict with each other. The act will make sure that to whom the rules are applicable and to whom the regulations are applicable. So listed company is one case here. Also, the company which have listed or which intend to list its class of security. Now, what do you mean by intend to? Which is in the process, okay, which are in process to get their shares listed, that will not be considered as a listed company. So one who has qualified the CA final exam, taken the membership, will be called as a chartered accountant. But you are in process, okay, so you intend to be a chartered accountant, right? You intend to be a chartered accountant. Will you be called as a chartered accountant? Answer is no. You cannot say, I can write FCA or I can write ACA. So ACA, FCA is associate chartered accountant and fellow chartered accountant. But students often say this is Adha chartered accountant and this is full chartered accountant, right? So you cannot say I am ACA, Adha chartered accountant. You still intend to be a CA because you are pursuing CA, but you cannot call yourself as a chartered accountant. Same way, a company which intends to get listed. Now, how does a company intends to get listed? Company is going to file the draft prospectus to SEBI, right? Company has filed the draft prospectus to SEBI, and that's where we say the company intends to get listed. Guys, got it? Guys, got it? We'll study when we do section number 24. Right? A company which has filed its draft prospectus to SEBI, you will not call that company as a listed company. That company is still intent to get listed. Only those companies whose securities are already listed on the stock exchange, only then it will become a listed company. So Ronak has asked a doubt. Sir, if a company is a listed company, but later by July it becomes unlisted company. So at the end of the financial year, which rules? So till the time the company is listed, it will be following the SEBI regulations. Once the company delist its securities from the stock exchange and becomes unlisted company, then from that day, the company will be unlisted and it will follow the rules. Okay. Till the time you are a listed company, you will follow the rules, the regulations. The moment you become unlisted company, so from that day, the SEBI regulations are no longer applicable to you. Okay. Next definition that we have is the definition of manager. So the definition of manager is again very important here. So manager is basically an individual. Very, very important part, right? Who subject to the superintendent's control or direction of the board, has the management of the whole or substantially whole of the affairs of the company, and it includes a director or any other person occupying the position of the manager by whatever name called, whether under a contract of service or not. So who is a manager? So manager is basically an individual. Okay. Manager is basically an individual. So there is an individual. This individual has substantially full control over the affairs of the company. Okay. And how does the person has the overall control or substantially full control over the affairs? Because this has been empowered by the board. Okay. So I should add one more thing before I close this with the bracket. This has been empowered by the board. In that case, we will call this individual as the manager. This individual can also be the director of the company. Okay. So that's where you get the definition of the managing director, right? So the manager plus the director becomes the managing director. Got it? You often hear this term managing director. So what does this word managing director means? Managing director means he's a director who is also the manager. Superintendents, Vinith, it means you are under the guidance, you are under the jurisdiction, you are, so like you all are in the superintendence, you all students are in superintendence of me. I am telling you what to study, what not to study, how to study, when to study, all those things. Superintendence. General meaning. General meaning. Okay. Thereafter, we have the definition of the managing director. So again, we have the definition of the managing director here. So it is basically the person, he is the director who by the virtue of the company or by a resolution of the board of directors or by the memorandum of association, memorandum or the articles of association has been entrusted. So as I said, there is a director. Okay. This director has been empowered the powers of the manager, and this person will become managing director. So just see, managing director means a director who by virtue of the articles of association of the company. So how can you become the managing director of a company? So to become the managing director of the company, you can become by articles of association or by the agreement with the company. Okay. So when you pass an agreement with the company, that again becomes the part of your articles of association only. So it's one and the same. Then you will have to pass a resolution in the general meeting or by the board of directors, right? So these are the ways where you can become the managing director of the company, and you are entrusted with the substantial power of the management of the affairs of the company. And it also includes a director who is occupying the position of the managing director by whatever name called. Okay. Is this clear? Is this clear? So just see the definition of manager. Manager means an individual, but to become managing director, first you need to be a director. Just like to become a holding company, first you need to be a company. Only then you can become a holding company. So same way, To become managing director, first you need to be a director, and then there is an additional responsibility that has been given to you, which is of the managing directors. Okay, let's go ahead and see the next definition here. So this is an important definition, definition of member. So how can you become the member of the company? You become the member of the company if you are a subscriber to the memorandum of association, who shall be deemed to have agreed to become the member, and on its registration shall be entered into the register of members. So there is a register of member which company has to maintain. In that, your name will be entered as the member of the company. So this is member means the subscriber to the memorandum of the company who shall be deemed to have agreed to become the member of the company, and on its registration shall be entered as a register of members. So one way to become the member of a company is to become the, or to basically subscribe the memorandum. If you are a subscriber to the memorandum, you are a member of the company. One way. Second is every other person who agrees to become the member of the company in writing and whose name is also entered in the register of. So one person who agrees in writing to become the member of the company and whose name is entered in the register of members. So second way to become the member of the company. And the third is every person holding the shares of the company and whose name is entered as beneficial owner in the records of the depository. Now, what does this mean? It means, remember I said you when we discussed the definition of depository, if I just take you back to the definition of depository, I said you earlier company used to issue the share certificates directly to the investors, but now company is is getting a contract, enters into an agreement with the depository. Depository converts the shares into electronic form and that is given to the investor. So to whom does company issue shares? Company issues shares to the depository. Okay. Then depository maintains a list where the list of the members are maintained. So same definition will be applicable here. Just see how it is linked. So when I say the definition of the member, so in the register of member, company will say who is the registered owner, who is the registered owner of the shares. The registered owner of the shares is depository. Okay, because company has issued shares to the depository, but then depository is going to maintain a register where they'll say who are the actual owners, who are the beneficial owners, who are the beneficial owners of the shares. So if your name is entered in the register of the depository as the beneficial owner of the shares, still you become the member of the company. This way you become the member of this company. Got it? Do you understand now the link? So what do you mean by the registered owner and beneficial owner? The beneficial owner is the individual. So like today, if you purchase the shares of Reliance Industries, you will be in the beneficial owner. You will be the beneficial owner of the Reliance. Who is going to be the registered owner of the share? It is going to be NSDL or CDSL. Got it? Is this clear? So what are the three ways to become the member of a company? Either you subscribe to the memorandum or you agree in writing and the company enters your name in the register of members, or you purchase the shares and the depository maintains the register in which your name is entered as a beneficial owner. In that case, you become the member of the company. Got it? Guys, got it? Right? So this is the case. Let's go ahead and see the next definition here. Okay. Does it say that the member has to be an individual only? No. Dhaval is saying no. So one company become can one company become a member of another company? Can Reliance become member of Infosys? Answer is yes. Okay. Okay. Then we have the definition of the memorandum of association. So the memorandum of association is again one of the charter document. Okay. So this is there. Then we have the definition of net worth. So the definition of net worth is important. A lot of the places you'll have to calculate the net worth of the company. So it's better we put it in the tabular format, net worth of the company. So what is net worth? Net worth is the aggregate value of the paid up share capital. Okay. So you will have the paid up share capital. Okay. Plus all the reserves created out of profits. Now tell me, will you see a revaluation reserve here? Can you see a revaluation reserve here? No. So you'll have the reserves created out of profit. Tell me which profit? Revenue profit, capital profit, or both? Revenue profit, capital profit, or both? You know, profits are of two types. CA Foundation accounts, capital and revenue chapter. You all must have studied. The profits are of two types: capital profit and the revenue profit. Yes or no? So which type of profit we are discussing here? Capital or revenue? Dhaval, where it is written revenue? Where it is written revenue? So if nothing is written, it is both. Okay. So if I have sold a plant and machinery and I have recovered more than the cost, even that is a profit. Okay. And if I transfer that profit to a reserve, so even that will be calculated here. Plus, I will also add the securities premium account, and I am going to deduct if there is any debit balance of the statement of profit and loss or the P&L account. If there is any debit balance of the P&L account, which is basically your losses, then if there is any other losses, accumulated losses, okay, if there is deferred expenditure. What is deferred expenditure? What is deferred expenditure? Where will you place deferred expenditure in the financial statement? Where will you place the deferred expenditure in your financial statement? Where will the deferred expenditure come in your financial statement? Asset side. Okay. So the expired part will go to the debit side of the P&L account, and the unexpired part will go to the asset side. But is it actually a asset of the company? Answer is no. It is just a expense that you have incurred, but the benefit is yet to be received in future. So you have written it here. Deferred expenditure minus the miscellaneous expenses which are not written off. So both these are what? Both these are your fictitious assets. And what are fictitious assets? They are nothing else but those are your losses. So this is your net worth. So if you have to calculate net worth this way, you can do that. Got it? Guys, got it? The definition of net worth, right? This is there. Let's see the next definition that we have. One is the notification. So notification is the notification in the official gazette, and notify shall be construed accordingly. So as I said, the amendments were made in 2017 Amendment Act, but those were notified on 9th, right? So the amendments were made in 2017, but those were notified on 9th Feb 2018, some of them in the month of May, some of them in the June. So this is the date when the act was passed, and this is the date of notification. Okay. Then we have the definition of the officer. Officer will include the director, the manager, the KMP, and any other person whose directions and instructions the board of directors or directors are accustomed to act. What is accustomed to act means? What does accustomed to act mean? They are bound to. Okay. Accustomed to act means they are bound to agree. They usually agree on that, right? So they are bound to agree, or they are bound to act. They have been doing this. So it's not one time activity. They have been doing this. So like one thing which all you boys will realize once you get married is you are accustomed to act on the instructions of your wife. Okay. Don't get judgmental about me. That's the usual scenario for all the person, right? So you are bound to act and you have been doing this, right? I have been doing this since 2016, right? By the way, I'm taking lecture from home, so I should not be loud on this, but I hope you have understood this term, accustomed to act. Guys, is this clear? Is this clear? Now let's say if a person is providing on the professional capacity, in the professional capacity, if you are giving any advice, will you say I'm accustomed to act to that person? If someone is giving, so let's say you become chartered accountant, right? Which I'm sure you all will be. And then you are advising to your client and the client listens to you. Can I say you are an officer of the company? Got the situation? I'm a company secretary. I have list of clients and to these clients, okay, and to these clients I discuss, they discuss matter with me and I advise them that what should be done, what should not be done, and they agree to me whatever I say. All the directors they agree. They say जैसे आप बताओगे वैसे काम चलेगा. So tell me, do I also become the officer of the company? Answer is no. So if someone is advising in the professional capacity, that would be excluded. That would be excluded here. Okay. Then again, you have the definition of officer in default. So the definition of officer is so important because you become the officer in default. Right. So officer in default means for the provisions of this act enacts that the officer of the company who is in default will be liable to any penalty or punishment by way of imprisonment, fine, or otherwise, or both, and means any of the following officers. So just see, full-time director is officer in default, KMP is officer in default, and where there is no KMP. So can there be a situation where there is no KMP? Can there be a situation where there is no KMP? Can there be a situation where there is no KMP? Yes, the company which is not having a paid up capital of 10 crore. So there in that case, the director or the directors specified by the board in this behalf who have been given his consent in writing to the board for that particular. So basically what you have to see, and again, like you have the definition of KMP, one person immediately below the board, the person immediately below the board who has been given the responsibility. So why the definition of officer in default becomes important? Because can company do things by itself? Answer is no. Company will have to do it through its directors. Let's say company has to prepare its financial statement or company has to file its annual return, right? All those things are to be done, that will be done by the company through its directors, right? Through its officer. Now, if the officer does not do so, then the officer will also be held liable. I hope you can connect this directly with the lifting up of the corporate wheel. Yes or no? So the corporate wheel will be lifted and we'll say who are the persons who are responsible. We will penalize the company. Okay. Fine will be imposed on the company, but also catch hold of the person who was in default, who was the officer in default. Let's catch hold of this person and make this person also liable. And then this person will be also sent to the jail or imprisonment along with the fine or whatsoever the case may be. So Companies Act, it actually provides that the officer in default will be liable. So to create this liability, we'll have this officer in default, and the list has been made here that who all can be in the officer in default. So here you have the whole-time director KMP. Where there is no KMP, then the director or directors who have given their consent, then any person, one person below the level of BOD, right? This person or any person on whose advice the board of directors they are accustomed to act. But see, they have given their explanation here. Other than the person who gives the advice to the board in the professional capacity, then you also have every director who in respect of the contravention was aware. So I was not part of it, okay, but I was aware of the contravention that was happening. So again, it will be considered that I am an officer in default, and in respect of the issue of shares of this share transfer agent, registrar, and the merchant banker to the issue or the transfer. Now, who are these people? The share transfer agent, the registrar, and the merchant banker. These are basically the intermediaries. Okay, these are the intermediaries. Rather, these are, I would say, SEBI registered intermediaries. They are the SEBI registered intermediaries. Okay, and these are the people who play a very important role whenever the company issues shares, like the share transfer agent. Now you, by the name itself, you will understand share transfer agent, the person who will ensure that the share transfer takes place from one person to the other when the shares are sold. Registrar, this person comes into the picture before the public issue, right? And then you have the merchant banker. So all this you will get to know when we study the public issue, right? So at that point of time, you'll get to know who are who, but just understand even they will be considered as the officer in default in case the company issues shares or the transfer is made and they do the default. Like the share transfer agent is the person who is going to handle the transmission of the shares and everything. So if the shares are not getting transferred, then the Companies Act will catch hold of the registrar of the share transfer agent that you are in default, you have not done this. Okay, so this is the definition of the officer in default. Then you have the definition of official liquidator. So this is again fine. Official liquidator under section 359. This is fine. Then you have the definition of one person company. So what is one person company? So company which has only one person as a member. Okay. Now one person company is again a kind of private company only. It is a kind of private company, but this private company will not have minimum two members. This will have only one person who will be acting as the member of the company, right? We'll be discussing a lot about one person company later on. Then you have the definition of ordinary resolution and special resolution. This we have already covered. We'll cover it in detail when we study section 114. Then you have the definition of the paid up share capital or the share capital. So this is again your already covered definition. Now paid up capital will not include any other amount received in respect of the shares which are issued. Okay. Any amount which has been credited as paid up. So that will also be part of the paid up capital. Any amount received will also be considered as a paid up capital. Now, what is the difference between the two? What is the difference between the two? Amount received as paid up and amount credited as paid up. Is there a difference between the two or both of them are same? Both of them are same or both of them are different? Different. So what's the difference here? What's the difference here? Amount received and amount credited. So let's presume face value of the share is 100 rupees. Okay. On this 100 rupees, the member has paid, let's say, 80 rupees to the company. 80 rupees is paid by the shareholder. Okay. So we'll say 80 rupees is paid up. Correct. What about the balance 20 rupees? So this balance 20 rupees, this will be called by the company. Okay. And then this will be paid by the shareholder. So this will also be the paid up share capital. There is another way through which this 20 rupees can be adjusted. This 20 rupees can be adjusted by way of reserves. This can be adjusted by way of reserves. So what does this mean? Just understand this. This will be called as the bonus issue. So when we do bonus issue, this will again come back. But how does this work out? Just see this. Face value of the share is 100. Shareholder has paid 80 rupees. The company is also called 80 rupees. Tell me what amount I will write it in the balance sheet here. 80 or 100? What will I write here? 80 or 100? If I have issued a share of face value rupees 100, which is 80 paid, what amount I will write here? 80 or 100? What should I write here? 80. So every one of you, all of you are saying 80. So I've written here 80. Cash is 80. Now what company will do with this cash? What company will do with this cash? Company will buy assets. Company is going to invest. Okay. So I say company did the investments of 80 rupees. On this 80 rupees, let's say company made a profit and company made a profit of 50 rupees. So here you will have a cash or you will have some other asset which is worth 50 rupees. Yes or no? Because profit कमाया है तो balance sheet तो tally करेगा ना. So 130, 130. Where this profit would go? Where will this profit go? This profit would be transferred to the reserves, free reserves. Yes or no? We just discussed. This will be transferred to the reserves. So this is the way. Now the company tells to this shareholder that this 50 rupees I want to give you as dividend. So you can take this 50 rupees as dividend, or you can ensure that 50 rupees remains with the company. Okay. And we further give you more returns. This 50 rupees is not to the company. This 50 rupees still belongs to you as a shareholder. So you will get more profits in future. The shareholder agrees to this, and the shareholder says that don't give me dividend, keep this 50 rupees with you. But at the same time, don't keep my share as partly paid up, make it fully paid up. So how this can be made as fully paid up? Company will deduct 20 rupees from here and company will add 20 rupees here. Due to this, the equity share capital will become 100 and the reserves will become 30 rupees. So what will be the new balance sheet of the company? The new balance sheet of the company will look like this. Equity share capital 100, reserves 30, and you will have assets worth 130 rupees. Guys, do you get it? Guys, do you get this part? Do you get this part? Okay. So here the amount, the 20 rupees, okay, this 20 rupees is received by the company or it is credited by the company. This 20 rupees is received by the company or this is credited by the company. Credited. Now you get it. What is the difference here? Credited and received. Do you understand the definition? Now do you understand? So aggregate amount which is credited as paid up, which is received by the company. Here the amount is not received by the company. Here the amount is credited by the company via bonus issue. So here it is received and here it is credited. Okay. We'll discuss this in detail when we do bonus issue. Okay. And you will also learn this in your accounts. Okay. The next definition that we have is the definition of postal ballot. So postal ballot definition, it means voting by way of post. So postal ballot was a new concept. This was introduced again in the year 2000. So you have a company like Reliance where lakhs of shareholders are there, right? And all these shareholders are not just in Mumbai. The company is in Mumbai, but the shareholders are not in Mumbai. They are scattered all across India and some of them are also in abroad. Now, when the annual general meeting is to take place, where the actual voting is required, do you think all the shareholders will come to Mumbai? Do you think there will be Reliance Express, which will be run by Mukesh Ambani, which will do the India tour, get all the shareholders to Mumbai so that they can vote in the AGM? Answer is no. But at the same time, without their participation, if you pass a resolution, don't you think from corporate governance point of view, this is not a good thing? This is not good. Yes or no? Imagine you have invested in the company and without your permission, the company is using your money. They are taking decisions. Okay. And the decisions you have no say. So that's the reason postal ballot was included, where what company used to do, company, if they have to pass a resolution, they will post this letter to the shareholder where they will say, this is the resolution number. Do you vote in favor? Do you vote against? Just tick which one you want to. If you are voting in favor or you're voting in against, sign it and send it to the company. So this is voting by way of post. Got it? So that is why we say postal ballot. Do you get it? Why do we say postal ballot? Ballot paper. Like right now, elections are happening. So what happens in case of election? So either you have the electronic voting machine, जहाँ पे button दबाओ, and as opposition party say, कमल को vote जाएगा, right? आप बटन कुछ भी दबाओ, कमल को वोट जाएगा. They say this way. But the what was the other way? All the political parties, the opposition political parties, what do they say? That we don't want EVM, we want ballot paper. So what does that ballot paper means? So in case of that ballot paper, how you must have seen in the old Bollywood movies also, there will be a box. Okay, this is the box. Okay, in this box there will be a hole like this and you deposit your ballot paper. So basically there will be a paper. On that paper you are going to put the stamp. यहाँ पे कमल होगा, ठीक है, यहाँ पे हाथी होगा, हाथ होगा, शिवसेना होगा, whatever it is, you will put a stamp here and you will fold that paper and you will put it in this ballot. So this is basically what ballot paper, and that's the reason this is called as postal ballot, because this ballot paper is received by the company by way of post. So this is called as postal ballot. Now this postal ballot has also an extended meaning, that is through any other electronic mode, which is your e-voting, which is your e-voting. So मुकेश अंबानी ने बोला मेरे पापा का सपना सबका मोबाइल हो अपना, right? So India digital revolution has taken place. Everyone is having the mobile phone, internet connection also, right? So now e-voting is also enabled, so you can vote online, you don't need to send. So in today no one sends letter, right? No one sends letter. We were taught when we were in school, we were taught the etiquettes, how to write a letter, right? Now the etiquettes is changed, how to draft a proper email, right? So that's where from postal ballot now we have this, but still postal ballot voting still takes place, e-voting also takes place. So the definition of postal ballot also includes e-voting. Okay, then we have prescribed. So prescribed means as prescribed by the rules. This is what I already said you before. Then previous company law. So they have mentioned all the previous company laws which are there. So company law of 1866, 1882, 1913, right? 1956 and then Territorial Companies Act, which was there, it is given. So again, not very relevant for you. Then you have the definition of the private company. So the private company means a company in which the minimum paid up capital, now this is omitted. Earlier it was 1 lakh, now it is omitted. Now it is what? As may be prescribed. So nothing is prescribed as of now. But in their articles, there should be certain restrictions. One is the restriction for the transfer of the share. Okay. It restricts the transfer of share. Then except in case of one person company. So as I said, one person company is also a subset of a private company. So in that case, you'll have only one member. But in case of other than OPC, the limits the maximum number of members to 200. While calculating this 200, you are going to do certain arithmetic, like joint holders will be considered as one, and then the current employee or the former employees, they will not be considered as the members of the private company. They'll be, for this calculating this 200, we will not count them. And then it also prohibits the invitation to the public to subscribe for the securities of the company. So this is the definition of a private company here, right? So how to become a so what all things are there in case of a private company? Basically, the articles of association needs to have three restrictions. What is the first restriction? What is the first restriction in case of private company? Transfer of shares. So the restriction is on the right to transfer the shares. One is this. The other is maximum 200 members, where we exclude like the joint holders are considered as one, and on the other hand we have the employees of the company, they are excluded, right? And also the ex-employees who were members, of the company, even they will be excluded. Okay. Tell me, will you exclude the director of the company? Okay, let's write the third restriction and then discuss this. And the third restriction is on the prohibition to invite public to subscribe for the security of the company. Now I have a question to you all. Director, who is shareholder? Will this director be counted in 200, or the director would be excluded? MCQ question. Should the director be included or excluded? Ronak is saying excluded. Counted. Saloni is saying counted. Dhaval is saying excluded. So please fight. Dhaval, Ronak, Saloni, please fight. I'll enjoy. And others, please don't be a spectator. Vinith is saying counted. So now we have a 2:2. Saloni, Vinith, both of you need to fight with Dhaval and Ronak. Why? Pourquoi justifier? Ronak and Dhaval is saying that he is also the employee of the company. Okay. Ronak, Ritik is saying excluded. Okay. So Saloni, Vinith, reply. I feel like a Aaj Tak TV reporter. Anyway, reply. Saloni, Vinith. The nation wants to know. Yash is saying excluded. Prathamesh is saying excluded. So Saloni, Vinith, do you change your stand or you say still counted? Vinith is saying excluded. Okay, so Vinith has changed the stance. Now we have only Saloni. Muskan is also saying excluded. Okay, this is a homework question for you all. So the stance which you have said, Ronak and Dhaval, that he is also the employee of the company. Just do a bit of research. Is director an employee of the company? The logic which you have given is correct, but you need to see whether director is also called as the employee. Is director a employee of the company? And if your answer changes for this question, the other answer automatically will change. Right? Okay. So this is a question that I leave it. We'll be discussing. Okay, for sure we'll be discussing it later. But I want you to do a bit of research. That is director also the employee of the company, or a director is not the employee of the company? If director is employee, then you all are correct. Okay, Ronak is saying we had this question in the foundation also. Okay, just check. Just check. Right? Anyway, let's go ahead. We have the definition of promoter. So the definition of promoter that we normally study is what? It is basically the one who conceives the idea for incorporation of the company. He's the one who is behind the company, who is the one who actually incorporates the company. So all those things that we have to cover here. But when I say the promoter of the company, as per the definition of the Companies Act, it's slightly different. And we have promoter means the person who is named as the promoter in the prospectus of the company, or who is identified by the company as the promoter in the annual return. So every year the company has to file the annual return. In that the company has to mention who is the promoter. So again, promoter will be there. Or we have a second stance where we say the person who has control over the affairs of the company. Okay. A person who has control over the affairs of the company will also be called as the promoter of the company. And then we have the person in accordance with whose advice or the directions or the instructions, right? The board of directors are accustomed to act. Again, except in case of professional capacity, right? In case of professional capacity. So tell me one thing, is a person being a promoter or not being a promoter dependent upon the shareholding of the person? Can I say I have 20% voting rights in the company and I want to become the promoter? Can this person become the promoter of the company? There is a person who holds 20% voting rights in the company. Can this person be called as the promoter? Dhaval is saying no. But what if in the prospectus of the company, this person is named as the promoter? What if in the annual return, the person is named as the promoter? Right. In that case, the person can be the promoter. So the definition of promoter is not contingent upon the shareholding. See, in case of control, there is no problem. In case of control, there is no problem. If I say I have 50.01%, then the debate goes off. Whether my name is there in the prospectus or my name is in the annual return does not matter, because I have control over the affairs of the company. Therefore, I am the promoter of the company. But can a person with 20% voting rights be called as a promoter? Answer is yes. He can be. I'm not saying shall. He may be. Okay. So this is what is the definition of the promoter. Then we have the definition of prospectus. So prospectus is basically any document which has been defined as the prospectus, and it also includes the red herring prospectus. So we will study about red herring prospectus in chapter number 3, right? And it also includes the shelf prospectus or any circular advertisement or any other document. So what is the main essence of a prospectus? It is that the prospectus is basically inviting offers from the public for the subscription or for the purchase of the securities of a body corporate. So just this you need to keep into your mind. Okay. The definition of prospectus. All right, guys, this is clear. Then we have the definition of a public company. So the definition of public company is very, very simple. A company which is not a private company is a public company. And then we have this proviso, right? So the proviso says that a company which is subsidiary company, there is a private company which is subsidiary of a public company, will be deemed to be the public company even though it continues to be a private company by its articles. So by its articles means in that case your articles of association contains those three restrictions, hence you are a private company, but then you will be deemed to be a public company. Now what do you mean by the word deemed? Deemed means presumed. Okay, what does the word deemed means? Deemed means presumed. It is assumed. It is assumed. Okay, right? मानो या ना मानो, मानना ही पड़ेगा, वही क्या हो गया यहाँ पे? Deemed. आप बताओ, is this clear? Now I'll explain you this with an example. So let's say there is AB Limited. This AB Limited is a public company. Now this company has, let's say, 80% voting rights in another company, let's say XYZ Private Limited. Now, is XYZ Limited a public company? Is XYZ a private company? Or XYZ is a deemed to be public company? XYZ is a private limited company. XYZ is a public company, or XYZ is deemed to be public. What is the actual status of this company? What will you say? Read this proviso. Read this proviso. Ronak is saying, see, deemed to be public. So just remember, it is actually both. It is a private company, but it is also a deemed to be public company by its articles. So it is a private company by its articles of association, but for Companies Act, right? For compliance purpose. But for the compliance purpose, this will be deemed to be public company. Got it? So it's actually both. By its articles of continues to remain a private company by its articles. Do you get it? Is this clear? Is this point clear? Right? So here we have the definition of a private company. Then we have the definition of a public financial institution. So public financial institution means, so we have life insurance company, IDFC, specified unit trust of India, and the institution which the previous Companies Act said that that is a public financial institution. That was basically section 4A, or then any other institution which is notified by the central government, that will be a public financial institution, right? And then there is a proviso which says that if government wants to notify any company as a public financial institution, in that case at least 51% should be held by the government or by the state government, central government, or by collectively by the government. Only then that company can be a public financial institution. Then we have the definition of recognized stock exchange. So just understand there is a stock exchange, and this stock exchange is given the recognition. Okay. This is recognition given by the central government. Right now, the power is delegated to SEBI. Okay. So that case, this company, this stock exchange will be a recognized stock exchange, right? Like how we have in the Companies Act, central government means we read it as the regional director. But when it comes to stock exchange, the recognition is given by central government, but that is now been delegated to SEBI. So central government says that we have so many other work to do. So let SEBI decide whether this stock exchange should be given the recognition or not. And under which act stock exchange is established? The stock exchange is established under the Act SCRA 1956, Securities Contract Regulation Act. By the way, there is one thing which I should again discuss with you all. When I say the corporate law, right, we read four laws together. One is the Companies Act. Okay. The other act that we read is the Securities Contract Regulation Act, which is just we discussed here. Then we read the SEBI Act. Okay. And then we read the Depositories Act. Okay. Depositories Act. The SEBI Act and SCRA, Securities Contract. So this is 2013. This is 1956. This is 1992. And this is 1996. So these four laws are clubbed together. Basically, these four laws are what? These four laws are the corporate law. Okay, guys, this is clear. SEBI Act. Now also check. Now this is a homework that I am giving you. Okay, this is a homework I am giving to you in the budget. Okay, budget is also called as the Finance Act of 2021. There is a amendment which is proposed. A amendment is proposed. Just check that and let me know in the next lecture what is the amendment which is proposed for these laws. Okay, there is an amendment proposed with respect to these laws. Just tell me what is that amendment. The budget talks about a new act, a new law. Okay, just see this. I've given you the enough hint. Government has said that government has proposed some laws should be clubbed and we should have altogether a new act. Okay, so just see that. Then we have the definition of registrar of companies and registrar. So from here, we will do it in the next lecture. We'll wrap up the session today. Next lecture that we have is on Monday. Okay. Monday would be 5th. So on 5th, we'll start from here. And on 5th, we'll finish off all the definitions. Right. And with that, we'll be done with our chapter number 1. And then from Tuesday onwards, we'll start with the incorporation of the companies. Right. I hope till now, whatever we have covered, you have understood it well, right? Because these definitions will be again relevant throughout your company law, not just in an intermediate level, also at the final level. The concepts are to be applied in the other subjects also, right? So just revise till now whatever we have covered. We have almost covered 73 definitions, right? So just revise whatever we have covered till now, and then from Monday onwards, we'll finish the definition part and then we'll start with the incorporation part. Okay. So that's it for your today's lecture. Take care. Bye bye.